Today is May 1st, 2011. I'm Annette Conn-Webster, and I'm interviewing Carol Rosenthal Aaron, and our videographer is Ruth Andrus, and we are at the residence of Carol Aaron in Dallas, Texas. Carol, tell me about your family.
My family consists of the Berner family, which was my mother's family, and they were in the millinery business. That was Anna and Michael Berner. And my father's family was the Rosenthal family, and my grandmother, Lena Rosenthal, was Lena Tobolowsky Rosenthal. So she was from the Tobolowsky family that's here in Dallas, and my grandfather was a Rosenthal that lived here in Dallas. My great-grandfather, Abraham Rosenthal, married to Rachel. They had 13 children, and he was the second cantor at Sherith Israel, 1900. And what happened was they needed a kosher butcher. So he took his family and moved his family to Fort Worth so that they could be near the stockyards, and he became the kosher butcher. My grandfather, Max Rosenthal, stayed here with his family in Dallas, Texas. And he had 4 sons. He and Lena had 4 sons. My dad, Sam Rosenthal, being the youngest. And my whole life, the whole Rosenthal family has been involved in the meat business. All the generations and all the 13 siblings were involved in the meat business. So I feel like I've got quite a legacy here in Dallas. My grandmother, Lena Tobolowsky Rosenthal, actually came in a covered wagon from Wichita Falls. And my grandfather, Abraham Rosenthal, came from Lithuania by way of Rochester. His wife came from Rochester, New York. So, been here a long time. I'm 4th generation. So that makes my grandchildren 6th generation Dallas. Pretty remarkable in this day.
Were you born in Dallas?
Yes, born in Dallas, 1941, almost 70 years ago, and lived here all my life. I was raised in Lakewood, actually, where there were very, very few Jewish families. And I lived in Lakewood till I was 13, 14 years old, and my parents decided that it was time to move to the other side of town where all of my Jewish friends lived. I was raised at Sherith Israel and had a wonderful, wonderful life in Dallas as a young adult, a young Jewish adult. I started out in Young Judea and was there for a few years, and then moved into BBYO. And in BBYO, you start at the age of 14, and it was my life. From the age of 14 to 17, I lived, I breathed BBYO and all of my Jewish friends. It was the most exciting time in my life. In fact, I met my husband, Steve. I was 14, had just moved over to North Dallas, and Steve was 16 and a half. I was going to be a freshman at Hillcrest High School. He was going to be a senior at Hillcrest High School. And we met that summer of my freshman year at a house party. All the kids went to house parties all summer long. You knew where the party was, so everyone congregated there. We brought our 45 records, and we played music, jitterbug, and I met Steve, and I started dating him. And in those days, you dated early. Oh, it's a lot different today. And he was a senior, so I spent those years loving Hillcrest High School. We both graduated from Hillcrest. In fact, all 5 of our children graduated from Hillcrest High School, so we probably hold a record there. Mother, father, and 5 children. Growing up in Dallas was exciting. You had so many friends, and I have to tell you that today, my friends are still 55 years old. We've been together, 60 years old. It's a wonderful thing to have been brought up in a city like Dallas. Everyone knew everyone, and everybody was sometimes on the same family tree. So it was a close-knit society. And BBYO really brought us all together.
And back to your brothers and sisters, how many brothers and sisters were in your family?
I have 2 sisters, Linda, Daniel, and Michelle Levy, and they're both younger. I was the oldest of 3 children. We all live here in Dallas.
And do you have any idea? Wow, I know that you said you moved to North Dallas, but why did your parents pick Lakewood initially?
My mom actually grew up in Lakewood, and we lived in her same house. My grandfather had died very early, at the age of 56, my grandfather, Michael Berner. So my grandmother moved over to the Park Cities, and my parents, at the time I was 5 years old, they decided to move, and we were living in the Park Cities, and they moved over into Lakewood at that time and took over the house where my mother was raised. My mother went through Woodrow Wilson, so that's how I ended up in Lakewood, and it was a great experience.
And you said that you were very active in the Jewish youth organizations, and your brothers and your sisters were also?
Yes, everybody was. There wasn't anyone that wasn't active. Very few people that weren't active in the local BBYO or in their Temple Youth Group. But it was a very important part of everybody's life.
Were your parents active in the Jewish community?
I think my parents were active in the Jewish community. They weren't necessarily on all the different committees that were going on in the city, but they were active, involved in Jewish people. And my dad was extremely generous. He really provided a lot of livelihoods for many people in the Jewish community. And if anyone ever needed any help of any kind, he was there to offer it, financially or through advice.
And what synagogue did your family belong to?
Well, actually, I grew up in Sherith, Israel. My mother grew up at Temple Emmanuel, and my father's family, some of them were founders of Tifereth Israel. So we kind of have been around all 3.
And which synagogue are you currently a member of?
We're very involved at Sherith Israel. It's very important to our family. Our children are involved there, and they all go there and are members there, all 5. Luckily, all 5 live here in Dallas. And all of our grandchildren going through Sherith Israel religious school. So we feel like we've got a lot of legacy at Sherith.
Back to your school, high school. What did you do after high school?
Not much. I actually went to college 1 year. I was already, in those days, you were called dropped. You were wearing the boyfriend's insignia, his fraternity insignia, and I was already dropped. And Steve was going to be a senior at UT, my freshman year at UT. So we did like everybody else did, that we were good friends with. Once the boys got graduated, we all got married. So I got married. I had just turned 19 a month before I got married. And we proceeded to have family, and I had my 5th child when I was 28, and our children are Todd Aaron, who is married to Dawn, Nicole Blue, Angela Aaron, Angela Horowitz, who's married to Gary Horowitz, Erica Robbins, who's married to Craig Robbins, and Clay Aaron, who's married to Tracy. And 12 grandchildren.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're very thrilled.
And when you were growing up, and what type of organizations, other than Jewish organizations, other than BBYO, was there anything for you to participate in?
There really wasn't. It was BBYO. I was so involved. I was chapter president, was a member of Jenny Zesmer, BBG. And in those days, we only had 3 chapters. We only had Reba Wadle, Jenny Zesmer, and Jenny Sheps was the new baby. There were the AZA boys, and that was Henry Monsky and Reuben Kaplan and Brandeis. And I happened to have been sweetheart of Reuben Kaplan AZA. So it filled your life. You did a lot of good things. You did service to the community, and you learned how to fill leadership roles.
Was the Jewish community large at that time, or?
Well,
growing?
it was large. I'm thinking that in relation to the population of the Dallas community then, it maybe was about the same percentage. Naturally, it's grown, but all of Dallas has grown. And of course, it ended at Forest Lane when I was growing up. When I got married, the new frontier was north of Forest Lane, between Forest Lane and Harvest Hill. So that's not, that's not much, but Forest Lane was like the boundary. Yeah.
And how would you say that the Jewish community has changed since you were a child?
It's more diverse. It's a lot different. It isn't just centered around being Jewish. People are have more opportunities to be involved in different charitable avenues. There was only one club you could become a member of, and it was a Jewish club, which no longer is in existence. So life was different. You always worked together because you didn't have all the outside choices.
Where did you live when you when did you get married, and where did you live?
Steve and I got married in 1960, and our first home, our first apartment was over on Gaston Avenue, and it's still standing today. We drove by it with the same name. And that year, my uncle, Ben Rosenthal, built our first home, and we moved into our first home in 1961. We lived there 15 years. Then we moved to Park Lane and lived there for, I don't know, maybe another 17, 19 years. And then we moved into our present home 12 years ago. So we've only lived in 3 homes. We've been married almost 51 years. It'll be 51 years in August.
And what type of organizations and projects have you been involved in the Jewish community that have been the most memorable to you?
Well, all of it's memorable. I don't think any one thing stands out. They all play a role in my life and what I believe in for our community. I'm just a community kind of person, and that's what's the most important thing in my life is our Jewish community, and seeing that it continues to grow and be vital. Of course, you're with the Historical Society, and I started out as a board member with the Jewish Historical Society, and I loved it, and I think it's an important avenue for us to have, and I hope one day that we'll actually have a community archives that can be housed in a very special place, especially now that we have the 100-year exhibit that is so informative about our history. I've been involved with, of course, the JCC, that bears our family name now, and to me it's the center of the Jewish community, and it's the place where everyone is accepted, and it doesn't make any difference how old you are or what synagogue you worship in. So that's majorly important to me. Been involved in the Holocaust Museum, and of course we have to preserve those memories, and we have to teach tolerance, because there's Holocaust going on everywhere around the world. And very involved in legacy, which I'm very proud of our 2 facilities. I think we've done something wonderful for our community. We have something for everybody, and we all like to be closely knit and stay in that closely knit community, and that's what we've provided. Of course, Federation, the umbrella organization, is fantastic, because if we didn't have Federation, we wouldn't have all of these wonderful agencies. They were founded through Federation. And BBYO is still an important part of my life. I am involved in helping them to bring awareness to people. Everyone's worried about Jewish education and what the impact is on a child's life having a Jewish education. But what's also very impactful is having a social network that is Jewish and growing up with it and being around it. You learn, that's an education in itself. You don't have to learn that from books, but you learn it from acting it out and being part of it. And so that's the familiarity of being Jewish. So BBYO, I'm very proud that I am involved with it. And I was honored a year ago by the International Convention of BBYO as the BBG Alumna of the Year, which I was proud to accept. And I just hope people understand the importance of the youth and them understanding where their religion is and who they are, and how to stick together so that we can preserve what we've built.
Can you tell me a little bit about your tenure as president of the Federation?
Yes, before I became president, I started out many years ago. Jimmy Hogue said, Carol, would you help me with the Pace Setter event? And I started working with Harriet Hoffman in those days. And I worked for several years doing a Pace Setter event. And Steve and I were so proud when we could become Pace Setters, because that was a monumental step in being able to give that amount of money, $10,000, to a community. And we were young when we did it. And we had once heard someone say that the more you give, the more you shall receive. And that's truly been our case. So I started helping out with the Pace Setter events. And then they asked me to be on the board, and I had never been asked to be on a board, and I was so proud. And I'll never forget that phone call from Annette Hogue. I said, Stevie, they want me to be on the board of Federation? So I started there, and then I became campaign chair. And from there, they were looking for someone to fill the shoes of Larry Schomburg. Now, nobody can fill those shoes. I think of him as the elder statesman. But kept asking, and he kept asking. And I said, what do you want with me? And he says, well, you'll be good. And I said, well, I'm only good at one thing. I can bring people together of various ages. And I think that's what they were looking for. They were looking for someone who was able to bridge the gap from my generation to this next generation that has now taken over. And it's very exciting to see. It's moving in a different path, and it's becoming more business oriented. It is big business, and we have to do it right. And so it's just following a different cycle now. It's time to make changes. And that's good, and I was glad I was able to bridge that gap between one generation to another.
Could you tell me a little bit about when you were growing up and the large family that you had, and some of the ways that you celebrated the Jewish holidays?
Yeah, well, my mother, I still do this to this very day. I set the table 2 weeks in advance. That's the way my mother did it, and that's the way I do it. Everything is arranged 2 weeks in advance before the holiday. Our holidays, my home wasn't a real religious home, and so my holidays were simple. They were fun. We had a good time, beautiful meals, but it wasn't based on a lot of tradition. It was based on family being together and celebrating being Jewish. And that's basically how we handled our holidays. Steve's parents were more religious and more traditional than my family. And so once we got married, we used to have our holidays at the Aarons. And then it was my turn to start taking over holidays. And now to this day, I don't know how long it's been, maybe 40 years or so, 45. I now still do 2 holidays. I do Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Passover. Our daughter Erica does Yom Kippur, and let's see, Nicole or Angela do Hanukkah. Dawn does Thanksgiving. So we've worked it out. It's a family that we just move from house to house because there's so many of us, 24, and nobody else invites us. So we love it. It makes for a strong family unit.
What civic organizations are you active in today?
I've never really been active in any civic organizations except I've been active at Children's Medical as a volunteer for 8 years and now as a donor. I think we're very fortunate to have that facility in our city.
And who have been your role models in your life?
Oh, I think my biggest role model was my dad and my mom. They were 2 different types of role models, but I think those are my 2 biggest role models. I would say Irvin Donsky has been a huge role model for me. I'll never forget, he used to tell me, I went to your dad's bar mitzvah. They were the same age and raised together. And we had to celebrate Shabbat and get over there across town. And, you know, I feel so connected to so many people, but special, you know, I feel special for Irvin. I'm a huge admirer of Louise Gartner and all the things that she's done for medicine and for the food bank, and so she's done an unbelievable job. There's a lot of people. Everybody contributes something else that makes me understand the world a little bit better and makes me think about how to do things for other people. So,
is there anything in particular that you've done so much for the Jewish community, but is there anything that you can think of specifically that you would still like to do?
No, I think what I would like to do now is sit back and teach other people. Maybe not even teach them, but just educate them a little bit about our community and how important it is. I'm very proud of starting Pillars in the Federation. It's a group of 35 to 50-year-olds, and it is a non-fundraising entity. And to me, you can't always talk about dollars. You have to talk about people. You have to want to be around other people. And networking plays such a big role, and feeling comfortable around others. So this is a very special group of young people, and they enjoy getting together, and I'm glad that 5 years ago I founded this group.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview?
The only other thing I'd like to add is that I want everyone to understand that these places and agencies and buildings and schools don't just drop out of the sky. Somebody has to be working hard to see that they reach the needs of the community. And we all have different needs. Not all of them are financial. Our needs are to see that we have a strong community. Our needs are to go work out at a JCC. Our needs are to see that our grandchildren or our children are having a Jewish education. Are we financially needy? Not all of us, but we all need our Jewish community.
I wish you would just describe how the beautiful exhibit that you assembled, how it went, how you developed it.
Well, I was first asked in the parking lot. You know, a lot of things go on in a parking lot outside the Federation office. So the parking lot conversation was, Carol, from David Veeder, Carol, would you like to chair? I want you to chair the centennial celebration. And I said, well, how can I turn you down? So I said, okay. So got to thinking, centennial, year-long celebration. We need to have for our first time a men's and women's event together so that we can all come together and celebrate 100 years. And then we need to keep it going because we need to do, there are certain things that we don't have. Our community did not have an exhibit that taught about how the Dallas Federation got started, how the agencies became who they are today, and what was going on in our world for 100 years. So I was able to combine a fabulous group of women called the Timeline Girls. And that's Robin Sachs, Becky Bruder, Cynthia Feldman, and Krista Weinstein, who have various backgrounds in history and the arts. They agreed, not so easily, but they agreed to do this. And as they started getting information, we first visited the archives at Temple Emmanuel and saw what they had done. And as they started evolving and reading the books, the history of our community and figuring out which one was right, which one was wrong, and getting all the research and the data, before you knew it, they had butcher paper strung out over Becky Bruder's table and were putting markings on it according to the date lines that they had found. And out of this emerged this unbelievable exhibit that gives you a timeline down the center of the panels. On the left side gives you the history of the Jewish community and what was happening at that time. And on the right side gives you the history that was going on in Dallas and around the world, so that you have it all right there together. And these girls did such a remarkable job, and they worked beautifully with a wonderful graphic artist, Greg Dittmar, who helped put this together. And we now have this magnificent exhibit that will be around for 100 years, so that they can now, the next exhibit can be for 200 years of history. They can see how to develop it, and it's an educational tool for all of our children, whether they're in Jewish day school or not. It's an educational tool for the whole entire Dallas community, Jewish and non-Jewish, to know what we have done. We have made huge contributions to the growth of the city of Dallas, in the financial district, in the retail district, in the medical section. We've done tremendous things. We've had mayors, 2 women mayors, Jewish. And so we've had a lot of contributions, so that's why this is such a very special exhibit. It's now at the courthouse, the old Red Museum, but we'll be moving from there.
Where?
And it has different schedules. I'm not sure. It's going to possibly be at North Park in the fall. It'll be at the JCC. It can move out to Legacy. It doesn't have to just stop after 1 year of movement. It can go anywhere, anyone that wants to see it. We have it where it can be shipped and can be set up, and it's very easy. And the other thing I'm very proud of is the documentary that we did, the video. And I thought that we did a great job in bringing all that together in the history of the Jewish community. So we now have something for our historical society. And thank goodness that the Historical Society could provide us with the information. And it was a team effort. And we did it. Now we only have 2 more events left for the year. We have Havdalah Under the Stars that will take place at the JCC on November 12th. And then we have a Community Mitzvah Day that will take place where 21 synagogues are coming together. One day, we expect maybe 3,000 people to participate. So, what have we done for this centennial year? We've reached out, we're educating, and we're becoming a larger and greater community.
Thank you, Carol, for allowing us to interview you on behalf of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society.
Thank you, Annette.
Thank you so much,
And
Carol.
Ruth.
It was wonderful. Thank you so, so much.
Carol, tell me about your experiences in Sunday school.
Well, we went to Sunday school in South Dallas. And so at the time I was living in Lakewood, so we didn't have hardly any Jews in Lakewood, so Daddy would take us every Sunday and we'd go down to South Dallas to share with Israel. And then he'd pick us up, and that was the most exciting part of Sunday. Not Sunday school, but going to have lunch at Grandma Rosenthal's. Grandma and Grandpa lived on Wendelkin. And we made the rounds every Sunday because my dad was so devoted to his family that we never missed a Sunday that we didn't see my Aunt Esther Goldman, and my Uncle Max Tobolowski, and my Aunt Ida Leventhal, and Uncle Harry Rosenthal and his family. They all lived in South Dallas. And in those days, South Dallas still was home to a lot of the Jewish families. So we would go to Grandma's house, and we'd have lunch, and we'd have chicken. And I'll never forget, she had chickens that she was raising in her backyard. And we always wondered if what we were eating just came out of the backyard. It was great. I had the advantage, because of the age that I am now, of having a family who lived in South Dallas and family who lived in the Park Cities, and like extreme poles. It was great. I had the grandmother who always had the apron tied around and the big black shoes that laced up and the hair in a bun, and always sending me and all of us home with a tin can full of poppy seed cookies. That was the greatest. That was Grandma Rosenthal. The other side of town, I had my Mommy Ann, who was Anna Berner. And she was from a different world. They had come down from New York, and they were in the millinery business. And she was my Auntie May, my grandma, my Mommy Ann. She sewed sequins on everything that she had, designed and outlined every pattern on every skirt. We would go and we would use iodine, and she would go outside. And so, you know, she liked to go to Florida and places like that from the summertime. So we'd go outside in her backyard, in her duplex on Glenwick Lane, right across from the high school, Highland Park High School. And she'd let us tan. And we'd go out and we'd tan, and she'd take a kitchen timer, and we'd turn over after 10 minutes, and then we'd turn back on. So, you know, from poppy seed cookies to baby oil, I had it all. It was the best. And I don't think very many people in Dallas can say that they had the best of both worlds, but I truly did. And it was something I think that's just, I think that's why I love the community so much, because I can see all aspects of it, and I've been able to live through the many different times that people lived here in Dallas and the different cultures that were here in Dallas amongst the Jewish people. So it was very, very, very special, and I loved it.
And more about the intertwining of the Tobolowskis and the Rosenthals and
Well, the Tobolowskis I never was very close to. The Rosenthals had such a huge family. Remember, my grandfather was one of the oldest of 13 children. What was exciting for me in those days was that the Rosenthals had a cousins club. And they met, and all the Rosenthals actually lived in Fort Worth except for my family, but they came over and they would congregate here in Dallas and they would have a big party. And here I was, the little girl, and I was just in awe of all these people. And they all looked alike. You could always tell a Rosenthal man. And they all wore Stetsons in those days. I never saw my father when he didn't have on a Stetson. If you went downtown Dallas, all the men were wearing Stetsons. It was a different world, a different era. It was the handshake, the good friend policy. People weren't writing contracts to be sure that they did what they said they would do. They relied on one another. There was trust. There was caring. It was different, and I think that's why I am who I am today is because of the life that I got to see and lead when I was young. We once, Gloria Hoffman was my cousin, my dad's first cousin, and we tried to get the Rosenthal clan together again. We brought them to my house several years ago, and about 150 showed up, but there's so many now I can't even imagine. We're spread all over, but there's still some living in Fort Worth. So it's good.
thank you for the additions.
Thank you very much for the addition to the interview, Carol.
Thank you.
That was good. That was just a good little homey.
This is the Torah, Sephardic Torah, that our children presented us on our 50th anniversary.
Wait, I'm turning it off. The lights are, let's go somewhere where.
This is a picture of the Sephardic Torah that our children presented us on our 50th anniversary. We were just shocked when we saw it. It is absolutely breathtaking. They called Rabbi Gershon, who was in Israel for the summer, and told him what they wanted to do. And Rabbi Gershon went and found this Torah and had it shipped here. And they had 2 plaques put on it. And one plaque says, dedicated with love and honor to our parents, Carol and Steve Aaron. The other plaque says, in celebration of their 50th wedding anniversary. And it now is in the main sanctuary. In fact, it's called the Aaron Main Sanctuary at Shereth Israel in the Ark. Hopefully our children, our grandchildren, and all their friends will be able to celebrate their happy bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs reading from this Torah. And we'll be able to be there with them in spirit. Do you want to see the family picture? Okay. Do you want me to turn off the light or?
Okay.
Okay, let me turn off the light. Let's see if that helps you.
No, I was recording, but you want to tell us about it?
It was taken approximately a year ago this past December, and now stays in the hallway of the Aaron Family Jewish Community Center. It was presented there on the day that we had the dedication to the front entry, the new front entry of the JCC, which we were proud to do for the center. It gives it new energy, and it's been remodeled, and it's exciting to see something old turn into something new.
I will always remember.
Just one thing. Many years ago, when they had the Capitol campaign here in Dallas, we had the privilege and the honor to be able to name the Jewish Community Center. And the reason that happened is that many, many years ago, in the Jewish community in the 50s, everything was moving from South Dallas to North Dallas. And so the JCC needed to move from Pocahontas Street. Well, there were people in our community who didn't really want a Jewish community center, especially with the word Jewish on it. So there was some dissent in the community, but finally it was decided that we would have a Jewish community center, but it wouldn't be called Jewish Community Center. So they went to Julia Sheps and they said, look, if you will use your letterhead and you will send out letters supporting this community center, we will call it the Julia Sheps Community Center. So in the 50s, when they moved the center from South Dallas to North Dallas, it became the Julia Sheps Community Center. Many years later, it was changed. He had never given it financial backing, and they felt like they wanted to change it and really call it now a Jewish Community Center. So they changed the name to Jewish Community Center. So when the Capitol campaign came on and the city was building new places, new JFS, schools were being redone, Legacy was being built, and the JCC was going to be new again as far as the fitness center. They built a huge natatorium. They came to us, and because of our donation, they said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to name it? What do you want to name? And I said, well, I don't want to name anything that everybody isn't part of. So that's the reason it's called the Aaron Family Jewish Community Center to this day. So at the dedication, I spoke and I told everyone there that, you know, I went to tell my folks what we were doing because I knew how proud they would be seeing what we had accomplished and what we were doing for others. So I went and I told them, and I looked on the plate, the marker for their grave, and it said that the most thing that was paramount in their minds was family and friends and community. And that's the way Stevie and I feel. So therefore, they're passing on their legacy to us, and hopefully we will continue to pass it on to our other generations.